as therapists, we often don't know what we don't even know, especially when it comes to our own biases and blind spots.
Mm.
And nowhere else is this more true than when it comes to our own cultural and identity related biases and blind spots, because we're people too, all shaped by our own cultural backgrounds and life experiences. Our way of viewing the world will always impact how we show up with our clients, especially those of whom are from different backgrounds. And it's very, very important that we need to have a lot of visibility and self-awareness into how our stuff is intersecting with the stuff of others. That's part of the job. And so that's why we're addressing this on today's episode of Love, Happiness, and Success for Therapists. We're going to be discussing some ways of developing this very important self-awareness, and also some strategies for just keeping track of yourself when you're in the room with your clients, so that you are doing a wonderful job with them and really helping them have the experience that they need and deserve to have with you. So my guest today for this conversation is one of my personal heroes, Dr. Diane Estrada. She's
Aw, thank you.
well, a little bit. I mean, you're pretty amazing, Diane. And so I'll just do a little horn tooting for you, because you're probably too modest to tell everybody all of the things, including the fact that you are an author, a researcher, a multicultural trainer. You are sitting on a number of national boards. You're a clinical supervisor. You've been doing this for over 25 years. You're an AAMFT clinical fellow. You are the past, what is the director of the counselor education,
Couples and family therapy.
couples and family therapy program. Go ahead.
Yeah, so director of couples and family therapy program. And before that, which is probably where the counseling comes in, is that I was the program lead for the counseling program, as well as at the University of Colorado, Denver.
At the University of Colorado. And so, all to say, and you have a lot of history and a lot of experience, not just in addressing these issues on a macro level, but really being a guide to therapists and developing therapists who are seeking to grow in these areas. And so that's why I immediately thought of you. And I was like, we need to talk about this on the podcast. So thank you.
I appreciate that. It is definitely one of my passions. So you got two of my passions. One is to mentor our upcoming mental health professionals, and the other is definitely this piece around multiculturalism, social justice, cultural responsiveness. And it's one of the things I've been doing for so many years, and still feel like I am constantly learning. So that's the number one thing I would say we all need to remember, is we are in the journey. And
there's no arriving.
We're all learning. Right. There's no arriving at that notion. A lot has been written lately about this notion of cultural competence, and what a misnomer that is. And we don't get to that place of competence. We get to a place of continuous learning. So,
Yeah. That's a good reminder. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. But before we dive in, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know about you or your background, Diane, or did we hit the highlights? The Diane Estrada highlight reel.
Yeah, just now I'm currently in private practice, and have been all along, actually, because I'm a big believer in practicing what I preach. So I kept a private practice going all along during my academic career, and I've retired from academia. So I'm a professor emerita now, and have a practice where I see individuals, couples, and families, and continue to do consultation work in this area.
Definitely. And supervision, mentorship. And I should just go ahead and share transparently that Diane, we have a long history. I'm so proud that you were my clinical supervisor all the way back in the day, and continue to be a very important professional mentor around supervision and the development of other therapists. And so I need to have like one of those little rubber bracelets that people wear, but instead of mine, like, what would Jesus students, what would Diane Estrada do in this situation? What would Diane say right now? So
It's
anyway,
funny, we have that
I
transgenerational piece. I still think about my supervisors and what would they say? What would they do?
isn't that funny?
So it's a wonderful transgenerational gift giving that happens.
I know we've joked about it before, like the baby vampires, right? So
Yes.
you turned me into a vampire. Now like vampire, reverse vampire, a vampire in like an energy giving way. But like now my supervisees are supervisors. And it's just kind of like neat how you see that chain of influence
Yeah.
echoing down the generations. So, what I am pleased to share is that I think one of the strongest influences from you that I hope I've imparted at least a bit on to my supervisees and hopefully transmitting down to theirs are these very important awarenesses related to cultural awareness. I think is the very first cultural aspects and realities of our lives as well as our clients' lives, so that we're not making sometimes pretty substantial mistakes or missteps, or at the very least obstructing what could potentially be really positive and powerful relationships. Like it's really easy to shut things down through just the ignorance and blindness. And I'm wondering if we could even just start there. I mean, why would you say it is so crucially important for all clinicians, no matter what their background is, but to become really highly attuned and invested into understanding themselves first?
Yeah. So I think that, again, in this journey that we're on, the notion of understanding our own history is important.
Yeah.
Understanding the context for that
Mhm.
history. I think it is important that, again, we're informed, like you said earlier, by our life experiences.
Mhm.
And from a cultural lens, there's, again, this idea that actually our professions have done a lot of harm in the past,
Yeah.
where we have basically centered on a very Eurocentric model of
Mhm.
doing mental health that really only serves about three if even
3%. Now,
of the
this
world
this
population.
is a new of the world population. Like this is a new statistic. Tell me more about who's in the 3% and who's not in that 3%, Diane.
If we look at the 3%, we're looking at male, cisgender, white, middle class, upper middle class, which again, middle class is being redefined in many ways. Able-bodied, well-educated, actually like a straight heterosexual person.
Yeah.
That's a very small group that fits all of those categories at the same
Really
time.
does. It really does.
You know?
And that the whole even modern psychotherapy as we think of it is by, for, and about the white experience. And the 3% that you described, I mean, with the exception of the male identifying gender, you're basically describing most professional therapists as well, aren't you, unfortunately?
Yes. I think that, again, that it feeds into everything else. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when we look at socioeconomics, I think that the three top areas in terms of different cultural groups that I think define a lot of things are
Mm-hmm.
based on race, gender, and socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
And so these, again, categories, for lack of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
folks that fit into those in certain privileged ways are the ones that are able to afford education, and they're ones that got to look at developing theories. You know,
Yeah.
I am currently reading Decolonizing Therapy by Jennifer
Mm-hmm.
Mullen,
Mm-hmm.
and she actually did a theoreticians, influencers of the mental health field. They were all male. They were all white. And so, again, it's nothing wrong with that. They developed the theories based on their experience.
Mm-hmm.
We all do that. But because it was such a narrow description in terms of cultural experiences,
Yeah.
they spoke to what they knew. Again, nothing wrong with that. They
Mm-hmm.
spoke to what they knew. But as a field, we did not and have not and continue to struggle with the notion of how do we open up our eyes and doors and begin to have conversations that really invite different experiences
Mm-hmm.
that can inform our
Yeah.
theories so that our theories are better able to meet the needs
Mm-hmm.
of different people in context.
Yeah. Well, why is this so important?
I think that if I tell you to do what would work for me
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, you know, exploring the questions that I ask that
Mm-hmm.
really begin to inform the kind of information that you're thinking about in the therapy session, if that's guided only by my lived experience
Mm-hmm.
in my context, then it's not really going to fit. It's not going to make sense. It's not, it's going to be like, wow, that seems
Mm-hmm.
really distant, where you're
Mm-hmm.
telling me I should be thinking about, what I should be talking
Mm-hmm.
about, what's considered healthy. It's going to be
Right.
so different
Yeah.
than, what my experience is, that it's already going to set up for failure. I can tell
Mm-hmm.
you my own failures when I've started in the field. I worked like many folks that work in a community mental health setting
Mm-hmm.
for their first jobs. And again, well-meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be helpful to folks. And so, I was following my structural family therapy, which is great, but again, in context, where does it fit?
Yeah.
And telling single moms that are working 3 jobs that they needed to spend more time with their kids. Again, makes no sense, right?
Right.
So
Oh, when you said
how
that,
do
I
I
just had a
understand that?
pang. I've in a community mental health setting, single mom, working multiple jobs, doing play therapy with their kid, and I noticed that the kids' clothes were all dirty. And the mom came and I was like, "Why is your son's clothes all dirty?" She's like, I'm doing the best I can." To this day, Diane, I could just cry when I think about that moment and how out of touch that was, like, coming at this from such a position. And I hear what you're saying. Like, it's so easy to impose these judgments, these ideas, these beliefs about like what should be happening on people. And there's also a very real power differential, particularly in some environments like a community mental health setting. I mean, God forbid either of those poor clients that we, victimized in small ways, but still did, if they were involved in like a social services kind of situation and we're sitting there like, running commentary on how they're operating their lives, it can be dangerous to their well-being in some ways.
Absolutely. Sorry,
Yeah.
I turned the mic off because my
That's okay.
dog is barking in
Your
the
dog
background.
is
So
agreeing with me and
he
you,
is.
and
He's
he's
saying,
like,
yes, I'm
"That's
protesting
right."
this idea. Impose our views or our lifestyles into
No
other
kidding.
settings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it is. It can,
mhm,
it's very harmful. And again, it's one of the hard things is that like, all of us, are thinking, but this is sort of what the research says. This is what,
mhm,
you know, again,
mhm.
we know to quote work, but again, who is that research done with? And how does it fit? Again, different
Mhm.
contexts, different life experiences.
Definitely. So, having awareness of where you are coming from, your perspective, and how it is different than the perspective of the people that we might be sitting with as therapists is very important, particularly for white, cisgendered, upper middle class therapists, and there's like a lot of supremacy behind them. Like, this is the way, right? Easy to do that. And I think for any clinician who is in that power position with somebody they're sitting with, they're vulnerable, like it is our job to be self-aware enough that we're able to intentionally kind of set aside our pieces and really see the world through the minds of others, right? What in your experience though can make it hard to do that can create obstacles for clinicians to really come into contact with their own biases, blind spots, identities, and how do we begin dismantling some of that from your perspective?
That's a really good question. I think as human beings, we struggle with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're looking at the truth in some of our histories, we can get very uncomfortable. And again, it's a human thing that we want to turn away from that.
Mm-hmm.
My I was going to share a story that, my daughter is heading off to college next year, and my husband was reading a book yesterday, and there was a line in the book that said, part of learning to grow up is learning to be able to sit in that uncomfortableness of our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, again, being able to sit in that discomfort as therapists is challenging
Mm-hmm.
for us. And it's a necessary piece. That we need to be gentle with ourselves, but also invite ourselves
Mm-hmm.
to look at the stuff that's not so pretty,
Like
and to
what?
try to
What are we talking
understand.
about right now?
Well, I think that from the piece of understanding ways in which I'm actually doing a group right now that is looking at diversity in leaders, and social justice and leadership. And one of the things that we looked at were some of like the white supremacy values.
Mm-hmm.
And in looking at those, sort of, how is it that I uphold some of these values?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a person of color, I'm like, no, I don't. And then as we're looking through that, I'm like, of course I do.
Mm-hmm.
We're all embedded. Again, this is not about the color of your skin. This is about an ideology
Mm.
that we are swimming in that
Yeah.
is hard to get away from. So I recognize that for myself, one of the things that I tended to uphold is that I would disassociate myself from having anything that would be harmful to any person of color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm supportive of our communities. I want to do good stuff. But the fact
Mm-hmm.
of the matter is that we have to do things in structure, right? Again, I was trained in this Eurocentric model
Mm-hmm.
of like, there is a timing issue, there's a structure issue, there is a way to do things. And my expectations then are very high for folks within the community because I want us to succeed, and yet haven't really investigated what that
Mm-hmm.
actually means, and is there more than one model of succeeding?
Yeah.
And really sort of challenging the notions of the ways in which we get to
Mm-hmm.
these places of quote success,
Yeah.
and really creating harm for some of
Yeah.
the beautiful people that I care for deeply,
Wow.
but again, not recognizing ways in which
Mm-hmm.
I am practicing within that
Right.
swimming pool of this ideology.
I totally hear you. But that's the thing, is that cultures can be so invisible to us that you have been acculturated in this academic counselor practitioner role that is now informing the way that you're operating with OP, and like that in itself is a thing that requires a lot of self-awareness and visibility, and it can happen in so many different ways that we're just don't even see it until we have
Yeah,
that moment of, oh, wait a minute. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
the getting comfy with being uncomfy is part of that path, is really the
Mhm.
very brave exploration of, ooh, I don't want to think that about myself, and actually
Yeah,
there it is. And certainly, I mean, with many white people, there can be so much anxiety and discomfort, just with the reality of the role and the history and the ways of continuing to subconsciously contribute to these dynamics. But I think Well, and maybe even to speak to this too. I mean, people from other communities, communities of color. I mean, is there a need for reckoning around what if it's a clinician of color with a white client needing to come to terms with maybe feelings of anger or resentment that they might be holding towards that client that could impair their ability to be that helpful guide for that person in their time of need? I mean, is it just white majority people, or is it something that all people in the role of being a therapist and a guide need to be reckoning with?
Well, I think that there's a different journey. I think that there
Hmm.
is a piece of, again, because the training is embedded in a white Eurocentric, there's less potential,
Hmm.
for that notion of that folks of color have always had to know how to work in a white world.
Hmm.
So there's a certain skill base that's already in place,
Yeah.
with that.
Hmm.
I think you and I once had a conversation about sort of like how politics may come in. And
Hmm.
one of the things that I've always said is therapy is political. It really
Hmm.
is. It
Hmm.
cannot not be political. But I think that in the notion of just, the politics that say around election years, and,
Hmm.
if you have a client who may have a different belief system
Hmm.
than you do around, election pieces, that it is still this piece, this idea of how do I engage in a conversation from a curious place and hold myself accountable.
Hmm.
Like I might have like, oh, really, do I have to do this?
Hmm.
And angst about that. But
Yeah.
in my role is that piece of like, okay, what are the things that I can ask, facilitate for this
Hmm.
client to achieve their goals,
Yes.
right? And so in that, I'm going to say a struggle, a
Hmm.
challenge, that is a part of that. There is also the notion of, once we, in that particular place around the politics, it's like if we didn't have some of these sort of ideas that from the get go, it's an us them
Hmm.
situation. If I actually am curious, then where are the places that I can connect
Yeah.
to the person that's
Hmm.
sitting across from me?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
what are some of those things that I need to ask? How do I,
Hmm.
when there may be statements that are made, if I notice that my heartbeat is up,
Hmm.
it's like, okay, how do I hold that,
Hmm.
think about it?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that I'm not going to come back to it, because I think that
Hmm.
that's the other piece,
Hmm.
at least in my experience, there's this idea that there are going to be times in session that I'm getting triggered, I'm feeling
Hmm.
my heart rate go
Hmm.
up, right?
Hmm.
And so can I take that deep breath, hold it, put it to the side after session, think about it, what was going on, because sometimes it's too
Hmm.
hard to do it in the moment.
Yeah.
And is there something that I need to bring back into
Right.
session the next time?
Mhm.
You know,
Absolutely. The being
um,
very that self-aware, present in your body, noticing your own reactions, and then getting really curious with yourself. Maybe not so much in the moment there, but after the
right.
fact, doing some journaling, doing some thinking, what's coming up for me to help continue, obviously, to develop yourself, but also to bring that back into the work with your client. But I love what else you're saying here, and this is actually reminding me of a conversation that we had not too long ago about how we as counselors, that our responsibility is to enter the worldview of other people with
Mm,
compassion and empathy and understanding. Like, it is our job literally to walk into somebody behind somebody else's eyes and look at the world through their eyes to understand how it makes sense, and then help
right.
them begin, potentially rearranging the furniture on the inside in order to, as you said, achieve their goals and their outcomes, which may be totally different from the things that we would want for ourselves. So there's like really this
Right.
high degree of selflessness that is required in many ways in order to be able to do this work
Mhm.
effectively. How do blind spots get in the way of being able to do that? What happens? The clinician isn't doing this radical, like, oh, wait, this is my thing.
Well, I mean, I think, blind spots again are just
Hmm.
things that we can't see. So if we
I
can't
know.
see it, we can't work on it.
Hmm.
I would say that in order, again, and this notion of this is a journey
Mm.
is who am I walking with in this journey? Am I walking with people that are very similar to me?
Hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, what do I learn from them? But then what don't I learn from them? And who are the people that I need to invite
Yeah.
into my life and to my journey?
Hmm.
How do I engage with others to learn
Hmm.
about them and to
Hmm.
learn more about myself? Every
Yeah.
relationship that we're a part of, we're
Hmm.
learning.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
who are the
Hmm.
people that I'm building relationships with?
Yeah. Yeah. And looking for relationships that help expand us and maybe make us a little less comfortable sometimes because
Yes.
it's comfy to try to be with other people who are exactly like us, but it develops
Yeah.
those abilities to more fully connect with others.
Isn't it? And to more
Yeah.
fully understand
Hmm.
multiple sides of the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
So, when we were going through the 20 summer
Hmm.
racial
Hmm.
awakening that was
Hmm.
going
Hmm.
on, and one of the concerns that many folks that I spoke to that are members of minoritized communities are, is this going to last? And the idea was, it's probably not going to last because in order to really invest ourselves fully
Hmm.
into social justice issues, we actually have to have relationships with people in
Hmm.
different communities to
Yeah.
fully understand, not fully understand, we are always, again, knowing, but that there has to be a certain level of care and investment
Hmm.
to get through the exhaustion of all these issues. Now,
Hmm.
having said that, I also have to say that I think it's really important for us to recognize, exosystem layers of oppression, not
Hmm.
as just oppressing those who have been marginalized in some way,
Hmm.
but that, also how is it costing folks that might be in the political majority,
Mhm.
not the
Mhm.
population majority, but the
Right.
political majority.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
so what's the impact? Because I think that, again, that's where I'm like, okay, we have to understand that larger ideology and how it
Mhm.
influences all of us,
Mhm.
not
Right.
just some of us. It influences
Yeah.
all of us.
But that's such a good point, and how it could be contributing to the pain points and the outcomes that people are not happy with, but they're not fully realizing the impact of culture or belief systems on harming them in some ways. But again, it first takes that ability to even see the presence of culture and belief
Right.
systems. Um, something that I have encountered as a clinical supervisor that I'm always pushing back on pretty briskly,
Uh-huh.
but this will be one small example of it. With a clinician that I'm working with, like, okay, so tell me about the cultural, racial, ethnic, background, socioeconomic background of your clients. Like, let's put them into context. And a clinician will be like, well, they're white. They're American, actually. I've actually had clinicians say
American.
that. They're
Yeah.
they're American. Like, what does that mean?
Uh,
And then asking them, okay, you, therapist, how would you describe your background? Well, white American. What does that mean? Like, not even
yeah.
any awareness about their own racial
Right.
and ethnic and cultural background and how it is substantially different from another person who identifies as white American. Like, there's so many differences, and there's just like this monolithic, like just a basic normal person kind of conversation,
Right.
and
And
it's
again, that's
like,
centering that
yeah,
whiteness, right?
completely, but it's like not being it's the metaphor that's coming to mind is like looking like you really need prescription glasses. Like, without them, everything is just sort of like one fuzzy blob until you put the glasses on and they're like, oh, there are individual leaves on that tree,
Yes.
that it all looks like a big blob. You can't even see it. That's that kind of visibility. And I've been surprised personally by even some therapists who've gotten all the way through a master's program and are now working towards licensure, and they haven't been taught how to see that yet.
Yes. Yes.
It's hard.
Because again, that education system, right? So it's like
Yeah.
that all of those systems again are, we don't talk about this.
Hmm.
And we're actively seeing that,
Yeah.
in the United States, in certain states,
Hmm.
where it's like, you're not going to talk about this. We're not actually allowed printing of these words to be allowed in schools. So there's again, what does that then create is
Right.
that echo chamber,
I hear
right?
you. So a therapist listening to this conversation who does have a sincere interest in this and a sincere desire, I want to grow in this area. I want to see myself. I want to be able to see others more clearly. I want to be able to have genuine connections that are based on empathy that really like create visibility for the truth and reality of other people without imposing my own. What are, and this is big. I mean, this, as you say, it never ends. It takes many, 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 many years of growth, and you're always going to be growing. But what are some of the things that you might put in front of them to support them on this journey? Practices that you might suggest, or start with this book. Like, where would you go?
Well, I would say, the notion of cultural humility is probably
Mm.
the one where I would start. And
Mm-hmm.
again, just that notion of having curiosity and having an understanding that we are all different humans. And so
Mm-hmm.
how do we begin to understand the context of
Yeah.
everyone's life? And, physician, heal thyself. So we have to understand our own
Mm-hmm.
experiences. We
Right.
really, most therapists are encouraged to do their own therapy
Uh-huh.
as part of their training. It's like, this is part of that. This is the
As
doing
long
your
as
own
you have a
therapy.
therapist who's going to ask you those kinds of questions, because a lot of them wouldn't. I mean, just saying.
Right. But I'm saying that
Yeah.
notion of
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to research yourself, your
Yeah.
context, your history,
Mm-hmm.
because like you mentioned, the answer of, American, it's like, well, what is that? What
Yeah.
does that mean? It's like, so, okay, so knowing your own cultural history,
Mm-hmm.
understanding your
Right.
own cultural history is really crucial.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we can get very far without you understanding your own
Right.
history,
Mm-hmm.
you know, with
Yeah.
that. And there are lots of different texts. Like I said, right now I'm reading one that is really challenging everything that
I
we
need to read
are
that one.
taught. Yeah. So yeah, Decolonizing Therapy by
Okay.
Jennifer Mullen. She asks some good questions and it really is taking on just like the mental health institution as a corporation kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Good.
And so there's challenges in there. And I am a big fan of Dr. Ken Hardy. So I think that if you just search up some of his works, there will be a lot of learning that will happen. There's some folks that are doing some great work. APA has actually put together a group of facilitators to talk about multiculturalism.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Cynthia Chen, who
Mm-hmm.
is a local therapist here in Denver, is on
Mm-hmm.
that group. So I think that there's a lot that's being written, and if you want to learn,
Mm-hmm.
there's lots
Yeah.
of resources to learning.
Wonderful. Well, I will be sure to link to some of those resources. I'll get them from you and just stick
Sure.
them in the post that'll go along with
Yeah.
this episode so that people can check those out. Those feel very important to me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Absolutely.
good.
And again, just the piece of having folks who are going to support.
Mm.
I think one of the challenges is how individualistic we can be in this culture. And so, how
Mm-hmm.
do we learn to build community again?
Yeah.
Who's in the journey with us?
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, I mean, even that community of other therapists who are on the same kind of journey to call us out on things that we might not see. I mean, going back to that definition of blind spots, like you
Right.
don't know what your blind spots are. And that I think really requires somebody who has perspective that maybe you don't, and that you have enough of a relationship with that you can let in their feedback. to help you grow, that's really crucial. And particularly when it comes to our practice with clients, because we're in a position of great responsibility, oftentimes great power, and it's very important that we have a system of checks and balances in place to support that humble, curious
Yes.
perspective. That's what's coming up
Yes.
for me anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners on this topic?
Um, I think that doing this podcast, and I think that thinking about the kinds of conversations that you and I have had,
Mm-hmm.
and that others in the practice, have also had, to me, is again the notion of these conversations are ongoing and they're going to be overwhelming at times and they're going to be tiring at times. And
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to rest, but it's important to come back to the table and
Yeah.
continue, the
Mm-hmm.
conversations.
Yeah. And that's a very important point, because I think I too have seen, and it's kind of bummed me out a little bit, honestly, but how easy and how common it is for particularly, majority identifying people to avoid getting into this ring, because it is challenging. It does bring up stuff. And what a big, pillar of privilege is that we don't have to think about it in a different way than, as you say, somebody who's like developed a lot of survival skills about negotiating this world. And so that I just want everybody to hear that is not just a challenge, but really almost a mandate, that is actually part of this job, is to stay in the ring, do the work,
Mm-hmm.
be part of the conversation, challenge yourself to grow. Because if you're not doing that, this blindness can encroach and you won't even know it. Did I say
Yeah.
that right, Diane?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I think the notion of having those resources and continuing to engage in research, engage in conversations, and to engage conversations with our clients too, in
Mm.
terms of,
Let's say
I
a little more
understand
about that.
something
Mhm.
that I can understand something from a textbook, but again, that might not be reflective of the person sitting in front of me. So
Mhm.
how do I, again, humbly ask about,
Yeah.
this is some of my understanding. How does that
Mhm.
fit your experience?
Yeah,
And what are important things for me to know? Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm constantly blown away by how difficult it is for therapists to engage in that conversation with clients, and how important it is to engage in that conversation with
Right.
clients. And again, my experience has been that clients have been grateful that
Mhm.
that door is open. They don't want to be pushed through it, but they
Right.
want the door to be opened,
Yeah.
of like, help me understand more of your context.
Hmm. Absolutely. I care about you and understanding what feels true for you. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So important. Well, not what a good reminder. I mean, it's very easy for all of us, I think, to make assumptions about other people. And we really cannot know the mind and heart of another unless we're courageously asking those kinds of conversations, kinds of questions, I should say, and
Right.
engaging in that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that notion of courageousness is one that I think is really important to keep in mind.
Mm.
So much again of our training has been about creating safe space. And I really want to challenge folks to create courageous space with
Well,
clients.
thank you for bringing that up. I tell, like, people who start working with me, I'm like, okay, I have
Uh-huh.
to tell you something. But I do feel that part. Well, see, this is your influence. This is all your fault, Diane. No, but like part of my job is to create enough emotional safety for people. I mean, that is like a prerequisite. And it is also my job to create enough challenge for people that it is really supporting their growth and kind of, pushing them into places that we really do need to go into, whether it's talking about difficult memories. I mean, like all kinds of stuff,
Yes.
right? So that is part of it. And I hear what you're saying. I mean, it can be, cowardly isn't the right word, but prioritizing the safety and the comfort, because it feels
Right.
challenging for us too, doesn't it? To
Yeah.
go into hard spaces and like my own discomfort, like, white people don't talk about race at all ever. And yet I'm going to broach this question with you. Like, there's this like, yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah.
Along with all kinds of other courageous moments. Like, let's talk about your sex life for a marriage or family therapist.
Yes.
We have to. So that's also part of the job. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good reminder. All right. So all of our listeners also just got a dose of what would Diane do? She asks the hard questions that stimulate growth. I love it. And Diane, thank you so much again for having this conversation with me today, just sharing your perspective and your wisdom. This has been awesome, as usual.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about this. And we'll continue to have those conversations because we're a community about this.
Yes, we are. Good. So Dr. Diane Estrada, if people wanted to learn more about you, your practice, where would they go?
And you can go to www.
Okay, wonderful. And again, I'll connect with you after this and get those links and resources from you. I'll add them to the post. All right. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.